Hello, thank you all so much for joining us. We have a great conversation with you today, and I'd like to welcome our panelists to begin this conversation. So Carlyle, Zainabu, and Christine, please join us.
Hello. Welcome to this discussion with the playwright and German scholar Christine in a conversation about We Take Care of Our Own. I'm Carlyle Brown, the director of the play, and the Andrew Mellon Foundation playwright in residence at Illusion Theater, which has been commissioning and developing and producing and supporting new work since 1974. So I hope if you haven't seen the play, you can still go to Illusion's website, Illusion Theater in Minneapolis, and you can watch this beautiful, thoughtful play. And so we have with us, of course, the playwright Zainabu Jallo, and we have Christine. Christine, I won't risk saying your last name. I don't think we've ever.
Matzke.
Christine, okay, Matzke. Christine. She is a doctor and a professor at the University of, and how do you say that?
Bayreuth.
What?
Bayreuth.
Bayreuth? Oh,
Bayreuth, yes.
Oh boy, I'm sure I butchered that, but that's where, and that's we're off the rails already, right? And that's in Germany, and she's the associate editor of this journal, African Theater, which she'll tell you about later, and the former member of the editorial board of Matu, yes, Matap. Journal for African Theater and Literature, and she is a great supporter of Zainabu Jallo. So let's start, Zaza, I call her Zaza. Let's start with what brought you to write this beautiful play, Zaza?
Well, I guess thank you so much for this platform. It's really wonderful to be here, and thank you for the direction of the play as well, which is incredibly beautiful. Even for me, seeing it, it looks different from what I've written. You've done a great job, so to speak. That's all I'm trying to say. And I don't know if there's just one answer to that question, because it's sort of a culmination of different factors that brought that to be. But I already had material down, that I had collated from some kind of investigation I did of octogenarians, some kind of photo biographies. And while I was making these portraits, I got into conversation with most of my participants, and in all of that, we shared, they shared their experiences. So I had material for that down. And then an opportunity came with the Camargo Foundation project, where I had to write a play. And to cut the long story short, I thought, well, I had to dig into my repository and get this play, get all of these voices in some kind of play. But at the same time, I work personally on diaspora consciousness, diaspora studies. So I decided to sort of have a merger of ideas, diasporic characters in issues of gerontology. So that was more or less how this idea came about. And then I got this platform to write it.
So what do you mean when you say diasporic ideas?
Well, okay, the term diaspora has come to accommodate so many forms of mobility and historical conditions, but it would involve a transplantation of an individual or a group of people from where they regard as their homeland to a place where they would have to learn how to assimilate, build new lives, and sort of assimilate into the culture. So the diasporic character or the diasporic consciousness would be carried by one who is living in a place outside of their home where they regard as a host country, a host community, or thereabout. And issues of the homeland pop up in terms of memory, longing, and what I refer to as the here and there-ness, your in-between spaces. So it comes with a whole lot. It's so hard to put that in one sentence.
Oh yeah, no, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Christine, what are your thoughts?
You see, I find that really interesting that you pick up on diaspora. It's one of the first things that I noted down when I initially read the play, but also when I reviewed the introductory talk that you gave on Sunday, which I had missed because of the time difference. So I just thought it's really interesting to think about what diaspora means for different people. And what, and I think nowadays you can no longer kind of put it down. I mean, obviously there are these really grand diasporic narratives, of, for example, the history of the transatlantic slave trade, the transatlantic passage, African Atlantic connection, or also the history of the Jewish people, that would also be one of the big narratives. But of course, diaspora means so many different things. And I think what you have done, Zainabu, what I kind of found interesting is something that is very prevalent in the 21st century, or even in the 20th century, is like, it has to do with transnational mobility, you see. And these three characters that we have in the play, they are there because, there were like a force to be reckoned with. They were all highly skilled people and they were sought after, maybe in different environments. And then in the end, they find themselves in a place, where they feel they're not really at home, to pick up on what you've just said. And they have to make a home because this is the last stage of their life, which is kind of not moving. And they have to make it good for themselves. So it's really also about, when you just said gerontology. So I just thought it's really also a play about the end of life care. And, you used a very beautiful term, Carlyle, I can't remember, but it was something to do with kind of social care networks, in your introduction. So.
Oh yeah, the idea that the kind of things that we in the modern world visualize as social networks were once provided by the family, right?
Exactly.
When the family
and
networks.
that is missing in the case of.
Yeah, right. And there's a lot about like capitalism that sort of divides the family, that cuts people off, from their family. I also thought, I totally agree, absolutely. But I also thought it was, so much about the notion of memory. I thought about, when thinking after the play, I thought about like a Garth Bossman and Lena, when Lena is trying to remember, trying to trace her steps. Where have we been? Where's the next place? Where did we come from? Where did we, we travel? How that somehow at the end of the road, that, that journey is, kind of very important, both existentially and spiritually, the road to Tuba, and walking backwards, those extraordinary metaphors that happens in this play that sort of, say dimensional things, because it's a very dimensional issue.
Yeah, and I'd also like to follow up on the idea of the diaspora as well, because once we hear about the diaspora, we immediately begin to think about groupings, communities, and not individuals. So I thought, it would be a good idea for us to meet diasporic characters as individuals, uncoupled from their groups, and see how they function. I would refer to myself as a diasporic individual as well, that has no attachment to any groups or constellations as such. So taking them out of homogeneous groups, having their own lives, was also one thing I strove to do. I don't know how successful that was, but just putting them into or some kind of regrouping where they'd have to learn or to adapt to a new community, a new environment, and bring in their different personalities, their different memories to play, without trying to create a cacophony of dialogues. But it was that kind of experiment I was looking to do as well, because more and more with transnational mobility, we have individuals traveling and not a people transplanted in groups where they'd have clusters in different home communities. So I thought that also was the character of the 21st century diasporan, so to speak.
Yes.
Well, I thought that was kind of sort of an interesting, when you say like kind of groupings, because I felt like those three men, they were a group because they had a shared experience, a pretty similar shared experience about being distinguished, separated from home and being in this thing. And yet there were just all of the sort of multiplicities of sort of differences and kind of nuances. I guess it sort of, allowed us to see what it is that that you're saying in sort of a, multiplicitable way, because it is complex.
Yes. Also, what I find quite interesting now, the idea of home and diaspora. I had the feeling that these three characters, these memories that come up is only when they are forced to sit still, because they're no longer in a kind of work environment where they have things to do, I'm no longer an active astrophysicist trying to discover, new planets, but I'm just sitting here waiting to see whether this board has actually accepted my name of that new star that I've discovered. And it happens to be the name of my former wife, Karidatu. So, and that kind of sets off the memories, also the memories of homeland. And I think this is something, maybe it's not necessarily only a diasporic experience, but I think, when you come to a later stage in your life, you're also beginning to think of, what have I done? You begin to reflect about things, that's where you come in, Carlyle, with the idea of memory. And then it kind of sets things going. So I think is a beautiful connection, Zainabu, which I really like about the play,
Well, thank you so very much for that. And I'd take the baton from the idea of memory as well, because with memory, memory is like the past made present in some sort of way. And this is what they battle with different kinds of memories. And Alida and Jan Assmann have made wonderful work in breaking down, the kinds of memories, communicative memories, and even a perpetrator's memory, which we see Monsu dealing with all the time. So memories they come in different shapes, colors, sizes, and we see how this is performed. And you mentioned something about them sitting still. I'm glad that you got that, because they're really encumbered with this psychic restlessness about what their memories do to them, the thought of how meaningful their lives have been, and just them feeling out of place most of the time, and what they do with that. I think memory is one of those accompaniments of the diasporic character as well, because you need memory to recollect, you need memory to miss home, you need memories to conjure up, you know, several threads of one's livelihood. And it's something that I kind of battle with too. Like when people ask, what kinds of memories are you dealing with the characters here? It's something that's also identifiable, not just for diasporic characters or individuals as well, but for us as humans generally. And it was one of the huge challenges as well, how to make that performative within the characters. And
well, I must say that, like, you know, the play, right, sort of intersects the reality of the fact that you have actors who are also elderly, right? Right? And so memory is a real issue in the execution of the play, right? You know, just even thinking about it, like, well, do we have an actor who remembers lines, you know, or will that kind of, you know, those kinds of issues become, you know, real and tangential issues in terms of realizing sort of what the character is in the play. And it works, you know, it kinds of mess and creates, creates an understanding in them, which is sort of organic in a way, which is like sort of beyond what I really understand what they're doing about, like, sort of being, you know, being elderly, because they're also enjoying, being old guys in an old guys play. You know, that's like sort of a real thing that really sort of speaks to, you know, the fact that we don't really have, we don't really very much memorialize the experience of elderly people in the theater. You know, and so, the actors found this was like a great opportunity to sort of address those things.
And I mean, maybe I can chip in there, Carlyle. You know, what I really liked about the play, and, I had several plays. Zainabu had sent me several plays that we could publish in that particular volume. And in the end, I went for, we take care of our own. And I didn't know about Camargo, and I didn't know about you, Carlyle, and, all the different readings that had been taking place until then, it had been happening. Because I do think it brings voices to the stage that you very rarely hear. But I would like to come, and I hope I'm kind of not mixing up our line of discussion here. I would like to come back to what you say, Zainabu, in terms of they still sit still and they have memories. But the interesting thing is, it's not the pleasant memories that come back, but it's the memories that they have kind of suppressed all their lives. And they don't really want to deal with it. And it takes almost the whole play to kind of understand what they're talking about. I mean, Monsu, he says at one point, I think I might have killed a man once, and everyone goes, what is he on about, blah, 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 blah. And so it continues. And it's only at the end that the different characters reveal more of themselves to the others, who are kind of then witnessing, what Monsoon or Bajran or Yusuf might have done. But also, I think the hardest thing is really to kind of face up to these memories yourself, because you've kind of pushed them aside all the time. And now they're coming up, and now you have to deal with them because it's the only time you have. And
yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because they kind of serve as therapists for each other, or like they're in some kind of confessional, so to speak, where they're just compelled in a way to say things that, like you rightly pointed out, have been suppressed, probably them sharing it for the very first time, or even uttering it out loud for the very first time. And while we were in rehearsals in Minneapolis 2 years ago, or was that last year, most of these actors actually identified with that, which made me feel like, okay, well, we could be onto something here. Oh, they would say things like, sometimes we just sit and memories just pop from when they were little. They're things probably they wouldn't even remember from the past 5 years, and then they're thinking about 40, 50 years ago. Just a memory comes like a flash, and it's just so vivid. And it's incredible how that happens. And for characters in the play to have such flashes as well was something that was somewhat believable for the actors as well, which made the experience quite rewarding as well.
Well, I mean, the kinds of things that happen to us in our lives, which are particularly the ones that are traumatic, are encoded in our hypothalamus, and, we can forget it. And when we get some stimulus that like rises that all up, we can't really tell the difference between the past and the present, when and that happens. And there is this stimulus that happens to them in this play that forces them to reveal these things in spite of themselves, which is a great piece of dramatic expression.
Yes, but maybe if I may add, despite the very serious content, that is gradually being revealed, there's still a lightness to the play, at least also when I read it, and of course for me it was wonderful because I'd never seen it in performance. And I think that's one of the things, that we're all waiting for. And when I'm in class, I sometimes make people read out certain passages, just so that they can hear at least, some of the voices. There is a lightness of tone. It's serious and it's at the same time almost funny, but not in a kind of, do you know what I mean? I mean,
oh yeah.
I'm not making sense, and I don't really know how to express that right now. But I think there's a wonderful mix in that play where you can go along with. So it's not that you're coming out of this play and you're kind of depressed or anything, but there's
Thank God for that.
What did you say? What
Even
did you
though
say?
one of the characters has died, I mean, it's terrible. Yusuf has died,
Yeah.
And it's like the other two characters, they're kind of making peace with that. And so am I as a member of the audience. So I'll pass it on to anybody who wants to develop that further.
Well, when you talked about getting out of it depressed, people who have read the play, I was just talking to Carlyle 2 days ago about how people have received it differently. The reading, saying it was just so terribly sad, and I thought, wow, okay, well, it was not the intention, but I just feel a kind of way when I am stamped as someone who writes dark and depressing plays. You've seen White Elephants and all of that. I'm like, oh well, I wish I could write happier plays, but these are the issues that nudge me the most.
Well, this was not like a dark, depressing play, and and in those those kinds of descriptions of plays, I mean, it's just how people feel, and they're kind of like responsible for it, But the play is, people don't feel that way one way or another unless the work is authentic and speaks to them, in a very, real way, and so, there's some immutable truths in the play, which are not like deep philosophical sorts of things, but the fact that like Bajran would stab his hand just to join back in the game again, like, oh, okay, and he sort of stabbed his hand. I mean, there's something about that that's just like really visceral and real, and we could recognize that as a human truth, and the play is just filled with that kind of thing.
And what I would like to add is, when I watched the introduction to the show, Jeremy Cohen said something about, this is a place of learning. And I think he probably referred to the Playwright Center. But I do think the play itself is a place of learning, because also the characters learn, from what I can see. Because first of all, they learn how to live with each other, because they're the only friends they have there, apart from the nurses that look after them. And we all know that they're being looked after quite well, but it still gives them a feeling that, maybe I don't really have my life under control anymore, because there are all kinds of forces who tell me when to eat and when to go to bed and when to do whatever. And I think at the beginning, you know, they're kind of a group of 3 men, and they're just stuck with each other. They have no choice. But in the end, you know, through all the quarrels and bickering that they go through, they become friends, and they're beginning to understand each other, and they also start to bond. And I think, you know, taking up the idea of learning, I think that's what the play also does for me. And that's what I find so beautiful also about it, you know. Even though Yusuf has to go, and they even start fighting, you know, when he's dead, you know, when he's having a heart attack, and they said, oh, it was you, and you said this, and then, no, because you made me upset, and that upset Yusuf, and so on and so forth. But then in the end, they're really, you know, also beginning to value the friendship they had with Yusuf, and Yusuf as a person, and themselves much more. And I really like that. That's why I think, even though it's, you know, we know that they're saying goodbye to him, we know that Yusuf is on his last passage, but there's also the idea of that tonight he will be sharing the bed with his wife, you know, his former wife. So there's something joyful in it, you know? So that's why I think that the play, despite the content, it ends on a very upbeat note for me, you know. I mean, I can't.
Oh, you know, that's interesting. You know, I see it in a little different way. It seems to me that like they just love each other from the beginning. You know, I mean, there's so many things that they do throughout the play that they forgive each other. Their transgressions, you know, they're like nasty. They're very, you know, they're very honest to each other. You know, like, you know, well, why is it my panopticon? I mean, you know, and maybe part of that is like, you know, being old, but you don't really have any time for anything sort of extraneous. You know, and so they're just kind of really authentic with each other. You know, they're always kind of like forgiving and understanding, and they just say just how they feel. You know, it's actually a wonderful relationship, I think, you know, that the 3 of them have. But if I might change the trajectory, I think that like people would like to know more about you, Zainabu. You know, like, you know, what has been you know, like maybe Christine could say something about the work that you've done before, you know, that she knows about you, and you know, what is your thrust and mission in life as
maybe I could start.
I think most people well, I'm not, you know, I don't come from a generation like that, you know, like, you know, scholars and artists, you know, particularly an artist that can write as well as you can. So tell us what your thing is.
It's the most difficult part, you know, talking about myself, you know, but I would say I have 1 foot in academia, almost 2 feet actually now in academia. I am a social anthropologist, and my research is actually on the same thread, so to speak. I research objects from Afro-Brazilian cultures and religions that have transferred from West Africa to northeast of Brazil specifically. So I'm an anthropologist. I also teach a course in on material culture that has like the mobility of objects, diasporic objects as well from different parts of the world, how objects travel. And for writing, I always would like to see it as a hobby, because once it becomes a profession, then I mess things up with that, because there's so much joy in writing, and I enjoy doing it as a hobby and not as some kind of not a compelled activity. The one time I was given like a commission to write a play, it's a play I really do not even talk about. I remove it from everything because I think it's the worst play I ever wrote. So I write as a hobby. I enjoy writing as a hobby. While
if I can interrupt you, Zainabu, yeah. What made you feel compelled to share that with us?
Yeah, because of the conversation we had the last time.
Yeah.
We spoke about this the last time, and I thought, okay, you kept on saying things about being a playwright, a professional playwright. I just see it as a hobby, so to speak, and that was why I just wanted to put it out there that I also have another. I have a life outside of playwriting, but this is like my cocoon. It's like my sacred space where I like to go in and experiment with things without any rules, so to speak. So,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know,
Well, you know, whatever I said about that regard, it was just sort of like to compliment you because you do it very well. So
Thank you.
it will really well. So if it helps for it not to be like a profession to you, right on.
yes, good, because I think, Carlyle, you're speaking as a director, you know, and you want to direct more plays. You know, I could say that the first time I met Zainabu was here at Bayreuth at a literature festival, and it was an African diasporic literature festival that runs every year. And what I found interesting, Zainabu, I think you were invited as a photographer, you know, and I'm always, for some reason or the other, I'm interested in people who work in kind of different medias and use different discourses, because you use kind of, you know, a visual medium like photography, you do playwriting, but you're also an academic, you know, so you can, you know, kind of tap into different kind of discourses. And I must say that, and I think it's great if you just see it as a hobby. I wish I had a kind of hobby where I would excel as much as I do in playwriting. Well, there was a reading. I didn't know Zainabu at all, you know. I mean, she was like one of the writers or artists who had been invited. And then she did this reading of, I think it was Onions Made Us Cry. And I was struck by the language, you know. It was just a short excerpt, and also by the way you reflected on your own work. And then I should say, I mean, the interesting thing is everyone else, you know, who spoke before the reading, Jeremy and Julie and Michael and you, Carlyle, you were part of a team. So it was, you know, first there was Camargo, and then, you know, it went to the Playwright Center, and then it was further developed and so on and so forth. And I came kind of in at a tangent. And it was because a friend of mine in Hamburg, who has absolutely nothing to do with theater or literature or whatever else, she had to go to Munich for work. And she then called me and said, oh, there's a play by this, you know, young playwright, and I think you should watch it. And then it turned out to be White Elephant that, you know, you just mentioned another. So I actually went to Munich to watch it. And that was it. And where I then eventually came in with We Take Care of Our Own was that we were doing this, the kind of the last volume of African theater, which is not a journal, or I should say was, because unfortunately, you know, that was the last volume that the publisher produced. But it always had a theme and then a play, because people who work in kind of theater know that it's very often very difficult for playwrights to get published. So each volume has a play text in it. And for me, it was quite clear that because I think we have not really done well, African theater has not really done well in publishing female playwrights, you know, I would like to have a woman playwright that had absolutely nothing to do with Zainabu. But then, of course, I had seen her work on stage. I had heard her perform parts of another play. And I got so interested that I just thought, you know, I would like to have one of your plays. And then Zainabu sent us, you know, some unpublished plays, and I read them all. And another colleague at Moi University in Kenya also, you know, we were the two theater people on that particular volume, and we decided on We Take Care because we just thought it was extraordinary, you know, for the very reasons that we've been discussing the whole last hour or half hour. And that's, you know, and for me, I should just say, it's always a joy to kind of work with with artists, you know, going back to this idea of the place of learning, you know, to kind of work with artists, because it also makes my own work alive. I mean, I pay my rent because I teach, you know. So it was actually possible to kind of include that play also in one of my classes. And we had Zainabu come in for the last half hour and so on. And I think it's also wonderful for the students to kind of see, oh, there are actually people who do that, you know, that write plays, and we can discuss that. So this is my connection with the play, really. And I'm perfectly happy to support you more, you know, and champion your work, because, you know, I really enjoy what you do. Also in the mix of things, I find that really interesting.
Thank you so much. And it's been quite an eventful journey since then. You know, I had no idea that was how you ended up seeing the play in Munich. I can't even remember. I thought one came before the other, but it's kind of it's interesting because I had left Camargo to come to Munich to see that play. You know, I had just written 7 pages of We Take Care of Our Own before coming to Munich then. And it's just interesting how everything has woven into this piece, and we're here today.
Yeah, it's been quite an interesting journey, which isn't over. So what about this you know, this conference in was it in Hamburg? Was that where?
Yeah, no, it's going to be in Berlin.
In Berlin.
Before I talk about that conference, maybe there's a question in the Q&A.
Okay.
And you know, it's about, because we still talk about the play, you know, are there any plans to a full production? I mean, that really goes to you, Carlyle, I think. You know,
oh, well, you know.
Hi, Zainabu and Carlyle Brown and Fran Davis. So nice to see you and hear you. Do you have any plans to a full production? And hopefully,
yes, we do. You know, yes, we do. But you know, there's a pandemic now, so you know that's kind of a pretty sort of complicated. Yes, but we do. You know, the Illusion Theater is, you know, plans on producing. You know, We Take Care of Our Own, and to try to, you know, attract communities in which the play speaks to. But I think, you know, what's happening with your conference in Berlin is, you know, one of the things that, like, you know, I wanted to do by having that introduction in the play to kind of show what a, well, collaborative enterprise in making theater is, you know, and how that needs to be supported, like, you know, from Camargo, where, you know, the play was conceived and originated, and then the Playwright Center where it's developed. Then, you know, Illusion was going to kind of produce the play, but otherwise it's had some inroads in having, it's an example now, again, of having an impact on, you know, academia, where the issue itself is raised around the play. And that's kind of very interesting. And, you know, I was hoping you'd share that with us.
Yes, so I should just say that it's a conference that has been postponed. I mean, it was originally meant to take place last year in July, and it's the annual conference of the African Theatre Association, also known as AFTA, and it's convened by my dear colleague Perpetual at Humboldt University, who I think is the expert on kind of the idea of age and aging, you know, on the stage, because that is really her big research project. And she got very excited, and I must say thank you very much, you know, to you and also Illusion Theatre, because of the pandemic. I mean, the conference, I think, is taking place this year, but it will only take place as a virtual conference. And we kindly got permission to kind of stream again the recording of the play. And then we'll be able to discuss it, you know, and include it in the kind of body of work that I think is currently emerging on the topic. Also my colleague, CJ Odhiambo from Moi University in Kenya, he will present a paper, and hopefully I'll be able to present you, the three of you. So I think it kind of got the ball rolling, because I personally, I'm not aware of any other kind of play also that people will be able to read, you know, that deals with all these.
Well, if I might interrupt, if you could just clarify actually what the mission and the focus of the conference is, because I don't think it's sort of typical. I mean, the subject of dealing with older people that Zainabu does in the play.
It's on the 4th to the 16th of July, and it will be hosted by Humboldt University Berlin. But I think, you know, the presenters and the artists and everyone, it will be a huge community from all over the world. You know, people from the African continent or working on African theater matters, you know, everyone who's in, or African diasporic theater as well. So I think, you know, I think the two of you will be kind of, you know, the kind of highlights.
Well, but this conference is about what the subject of Zainabu's play, aging and migration, right?
It's about aging, and it's also about discrimination and I think disability.
So Zaza, do you know much about this conference?
Well, I got a wind of it from last year when it was being planned as a live conference, and yes, Christine had sent me some material on it, and I haven't gone through I don't know if it's the same, if anything has changed from last year, but it covers a lot of issues with aging and disabilities in diaspora, as far as I remember.
Okay, so it's called Aging, Old Age and Disability in African and African Diasporic Performance Film and Festival. So, you know, it starts with a representation of aging, old age and disability, and up until, and I'm not going to read that out now, but performance of ageism in African cultures. So I think it's really, but it also includes gerontocracy, if I pronounce that correctly, and the medialization of aging, old age and disability in performance, film and festival, or migration, performance and aging, old age and disability. You can see, so it's really, it's a conference that I think, you know, is trying to look at this topic from a huge variety of angles. Yeah. So,
well, you know, I mean, I think that's the kind of, you know, in the context, I mean, that's an extraordinary thing about, well, this play, you know, in this context, you know, the importance of art in terms of like, you know, opening up ways for people to look at stories and talk about, you know, issues that like, you know, kind of concern us all. And so it's a kind of a beautiful example of that. And so you've written this play, Zainabu, which seems to have like a journey of its own. What do you think about that? How's that work for you?
Well, it's incredible because I didn't see all of this coming, to be quite honest. But ever since this play was written, I think I've attended like 4 huge conferences on aging and the diaspora, where I had to present ideas about the play as well, from the UCD Humanities in Dublin to the UC Irvine and NYU and so many other institutions. So I really did. It also speaks to the urgency of the theme, what people are dealing with now, how mobility has really had its corollaries in aging and with a population that's not used to sending their loved ones to nursing homes. And it's not just a phenomenon that's strange to the African diaspora, but which is where the other characters come in as well. You know, from South Korea to the Balkans, and these are cultural groups that I interviewed during my field work for this project. So I find that it's really an urgent issue. And of course, both academia and the artistic world are beginning to recognize how important such an issue is, especially for when the figures are rising so high in terms of the population over 60 is going to be probably in billions from the end of 2025, if I remember correctly. I have the figures somewhere, but I think it's an urgent issue that needs to be addressed from every angle. And I'm glad that at least we are taking care of the theater aspect of it.
I think that's a beautiful note to end on. I mean,
yes, we're very proud of you, Zainabu.
yes.
Again, I want to let folks know that they can go to Illusion Theater's website. That's like Illusion Theater, and see the play. And this also will be streamed for another week until next Wednesday. You know, tell your friends if they're interested. And in the future, look forward to seeing in Minneapolis a full production, the world premiere of Zainabu Jallo's We Take Care of Our Own.